Welcome to Gulf Passage Mate. I'm your host, Captain Kevin. Today we're going to be talking about safety, route planning, provisioning, and decorum. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Let's take a minute and talk about safety. There's a few things you'll want to have on your boat. First would be the EPIRB. Make sure it's up to date with the FCC and that you have checked the batteries. You'll want to have harnesses on the boat, couple harnesses at least. So if you have to go forward on the deck. The lanyards, also the harnesses with two clips on them to where you can be clipped on in two different spots is real handy. That's really handy, especially when you're working around the mast. Let's talk about jack lines now. Be careful what you buy when you go buy jack lines. You go to the mega expensive boat parts store, and like I did 2 years ago, and the cute little girl, she did her best to try to convince me to buy webbing that wasn't jack line. She swore it was, but it was actually the webbing used for holding a bimini up. I wound up getting my jack lines from a local wire rope retailer who made them for me, even sewed the ends on, and I walked out of their store spending about $30, and they're rated at 9,000 pounds. Everybody should have a personal strobe. You got a lot better chance of being saved, especially at night, if your strobe is flashing rather than a dimly lit bulb that looks like reflection on the ocean. The man overboard strobe, if you're doing any offshore sailing, it would be a handy thing to have. It attaches to the back of the boat and has a tether between it and the man overboard horseshoe buoy that you may have, or whatever kind of life ring. When you throw the life ring, the man overboard strobe will automatically deploy and turn on. You should have a VHF radio in your cockpit all the time, and it should be on. You may ask, why is there a need to have a VHF on in the middle of the Gulf? And we were in a storm one time, and after the storm passed, we were cruising along and the Coast Guard buzzed us. Turns out one of our EPIRBs accidentally and momentarily turned on. So they flew out and checked on us. So a good thing we had our VHF on the cockpit. PFDs. It'd be good to have Type 1 PFDs on your boat. They're designed for offshore, and the fact that if you do wind up abandoning ship and wind up floating, the PFD is designed to support your head better. And when I go on a boat, I want to make sure the boat has a good sturdy ladder. I'm not the littlest person in the world, so I want my ladder sturdy, and I want it well attached to the boat. You'd be surprised what some people have for ladder. So if you go cruising with somebody, you might want to walk the boat and check their ladder. If you go overboard, you sure as heck want to be able to get on relatively easy. Everybody should have a knife on them. This should be self-explanatory if you get in a situation where you got to cut yourself loose or cut something else loose from the boat. It'd be good thing to have. Flashlights. A couple times I've joined boats to go sailing, and there's flashlights were just what you'd pick up in the checkout line at a grocery store, little cheap plastic things. You really need to have waterproof flashlights that are pretty decent quality and going to work. Batteries. Been a few times where I've joined boats where they say we got plenty of batteries, and they show me a baggie full of loose batteries. problem is most of the batteries wind up being dead. So when I'm shopping for provisioning, I like to get more than enough AA's or AAA's and all the batteries I may need for the trip. Let's talk about first aid kit for a minute. But you want to make sure that you have plenty of sunscreen, whether it be in the first aid kit or throughout the boat. Chapstick with sunscreen built into it. Toothache medicine, whatever it may be. Painkillers, so maybe ibuprofen or something like that, and aspirin. Some sterile gauze would be nice to have. Besides that, I've always felt I could improvise on the boat as far as what I need to treat somebody for first aid. But I want to encourage you not to follow my lackluster approach. Put in your first aid kit what you think you need. That, make it bigger the better. There's nothing wrong with that on first aid kit. So, deck safety. I like people to wear closed-toe shoes when they're on deck of the boat. There's been a couple instances where people have busted their foot open kicking rigging or the port lights or whatever, and they regretted not having closed-toe shoes on. You don't need to get a nasty gash in your body somewhere and have to go 3 or 4 days before you can get stitched up. So, safety first. But let's talk about lifelines. In America, lifelines are usually plastic coated, so you don't know what kind of crap is underneath the lifeline. I do know one instance when the boat owner went flying and hit the lifeline and broke it. And it was a relatively new boat. I tell people lifelines are a lot like an insurance policy. When you wind up needing it, you might be surprised how it didn't work. You'll be surprised how when you're in an environment that's always moving 24/7, how you actually get quite a workout just staying balanced. So, usually I'm watching then resting.
But enough with my babbling. Let's go play with the radio. Let's talk a little bit about satellite phones and high-frequency radios. Ideally, it'd be great to have both on your boat. But most people find themselves choosing between one or the other. The satellite phone requires a paid service plan. It needs to have a connection between the phone and the satellite in order to use it, which sometimes may take a while. But the satellite phone is also portable. You could use it anywhere, including a life raft. The high-frequency radio is free to use after initial purchase, but it's not portable. With the high-frequency radio, you have a pretty good chance you'll be able to get a hold of somebody. So as you can see, there's differences between satellite phones and high-frequency radios. I'd highly recommend you have one or the other on your boat. Thank you. We're going to try to get some offshore weather on the HF radio. Here's my HF radio. It's a Hicom M710. We got the digital voice recorder that we stick to the top. Play that to record the weather as we're also writing it down, because the weather's played at such a fast pace. It's hard to keep up with the broadcast. They usually start off in New England and then work their way down through the Caribbean, then around to the Gulf of Mexico. So we're not in our area yet. The weather's broadcasted from Chesapeake, Virginia, and New Orleans, and it's broadcasted on multiple frequencies from each location, which helps assure a good possibility you'll be able to receive the weather. So I start early because they say they'll end the broadcast early if they need to, so you could lose the broadcast altogether, or they could go through the Atlantic Ocean and working their way down, get to the Gulf quicker than normal, and then the Gulf would start sooner than you're used to. You'll turn on the radio and the Gulf's halfway through its broadcast and you don't get your weather. So So you got to watch your time zone. You should get a watch that you can set on Zulu time and leave it on Zulu time. So throughout your trip, you'll know when is Zulu or UTC time, Universal Coordinated Times, what that is, because that's a time that the Coast Guard uses. As you're sailing along, you're likely to be switching between channels as you're going. Right about when you need to hear the important stuff, it's liable to fade out, and you have to punch in another channel, find another frequency, and try to catch it. So know your frequencies. As you write down the weather forecast, you're not going to be able to probably write it all down quick enough, so that's why you got the voice recorder to capture stuff you weren't able to gather earlier. Then you'll be able to sit down and look at a full weather forecast.
Over the southwest gust today through Wednesday. The low will continue Friday toward the Strait of Florida through Friday night. A cold front will move into the northern waters Tuesday and become diffused from the central Florida peninsula to the southern Texas coast Wednesday. Gulf of Mexico, north of 26 north, Thursday night. Northeast winds 10 to 29.
So that's how the weather's done. You can tell I messed up several places, so that's why I take my voice recorder and I play it back and I redo it until I got a good weather forecast in front of me. Always do the zone you're in, the zone you're going to, all the zones around you, so you can watch the weather moving and get an idea of what's going to happen to you in the future. Now we're going to try to get weather facts using a HF radio, a laptop computer, and a $6 cord bought from Radio Shack. First we're going to do is hook to the radio. This particular radio takes a 1/4 inch mono jack. We shove in the headset jack of the radio, and the 1/8 inch jack goes into the microphone jack of the laptop. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the laptop. I'm going to open up JVCom 32. It's a software program that's free to download from the internet. So we open up JVCom 32, and any minute now the facsimile transmit over the radio. This is the beginning of the weather facts. The advantage of this is with just a $6 cord, if you already got the HF radio and you already got a laptop, is you can get NOAA weather put on your laptop. There's no special sound card needed. It uses a laptop sound card. What you're going to do is you want to get a list of the facsimile broadcast frequencies. It's just like with the voice. There'll be several frequencies scattered all over the radio spectrum, and you tune in which one sounds the clearest. Looks like the map is starting up. You don't need the transceiver like we have here. You can buy a Grundig or a Radio Shack or Sony or whoever makes a receiver that covers these frequencies. But if you get that, you're going to want an external antenna, because you're going to find the telescopic antenna on the radio is not going to quite do it. A few things to note. I had it set to 12.788 basically, and it was pretty nice and clear. And after the fax, really right before the end of the fax, it started to break up, and then I had all this screen here breaking up, and I noticed this was most likely the NOAA symbol right here, but it was not clear anymore. So it wasn't just between faxes, it had to actually stop printing clear. So I had to go to 8.503.9, but by the time I tweak it, it's 8.502. You'll see down here, right here, it's advancing, and the wind indicators are back up. So you got to monitor it and watch it, because it is almost, it's 10 till 8. The ionosphere has lost its charge, So that frequency is no longer bouncing off the ionosphere and giving me a good signal. So I had to switch to a different frequency. It's 50 minutes into the broadcast, and it's got a long ways to go yet. So it's got a lot of advantages, but it takes a while. But all said and done, you should wind up with a stack of weather faxes to be able to study as you go along. It's a pretty simple thing to use. Tune in the frequency, tweak your VFO knob to get a good clear picture. Also use your volume, and between the two you should be able to tune it all in. To help ensure a safe passage, you need to gather current data on the loop current in the Gulf, weather patterns. Make sure you have UTC time set on a clock, and have gone to the NOAA's website to get up-to-date weather broadcast schedule. Now let's see if we can make sense of this information. One of the least respected features of the Gulf is its currents. Some even say there is no current in the Gulf worth worrying about. Take a look at this next video and see if you agree.
9.4, 10, 10.2. This is what I've been doing. The Gulf Stream has been pushing me north. So I gave in and I said, okay, I am going north. That's where you want me to go, because obviously I'm not going southeast between the Gulf Stream and the wind. The wind's supposed to blow hard out of southeast next couple days. I got called into and tell them my course changed. So anyways, 23 foot of water line, that boat's hauling ass, ain't it?
One thing you can do to avoid the problems I had in previous videos to get up-to-date information on the loop current. The loop current comes up through the Straits of the Yucatan, up into the Gulf of Mexico, turns east, then south, and around the tip of Florida, and becomes a Gulf Stream. Sometimes the current will go up to just about Tampa Bay and across, or it may go up towards Louisiana, or there may be no loop at all. It may just turn here and go on up. One of the things that happens is, as this current moves up, it'll eventually break apart and create an eddy that will spin in a clockwise direction. And these eddies will sometimes move into the western Gulf, and there are times where there could be more than one eddy. The loop itself moves 24 times the water of all the world's rivers combined. The speeds of the loops and the eddies can reach up to close to 4 knots. So it's a force worth reckoning with. Let's say you're heading from Corpus Christi, let's say Fort Myers right in here, or Tampa Bay. Let's say Corpus Christi to Tampa Bay, which is usually a straight across shot. You may say to yourself, well, look at there, I'm going to be able to catch the top of that loop and pick up some speed. You need to keep in mind the wind direction, which is usually out of the southeast. If you got a southeast wind hitting this current, you're liable to have some pretty steep seas. With that, your boat will probably be plowing into the seas and slowing way down, even though the current was moving in the direction you wanted. So in this case, you may want to move above the current. Say going from Fort Myers to Corpus Christi. With the southeast winds, you'll want to get up above this part of the loop and try to catch the eddy somewhere right about here and let it propel you forward, and maybe set another waypoint to turn at the right spot and still use that current, that eddy, to propel you, and then you move on into Corpus. So many times I've heard people say there's not enough current in the Gulf of Mexico to be worried about. But on the other hand, those same people will tell you that the Gulf of Mexico is like a washing machine. And this is exactly why. Let's take a look at safety fairways. Let's talk about safety fairways. These little purple lines are safety fairways. And between these lines, it's about 2 miles wide. So these fairways aren't little narrow ship channels. My desire is, if I'm going through congested areas where all these black dots are oil platforms, is I want to stay near safety fairways and in the edge of them at night, especially if I don't have radar. There's a different opinion that a friend of mine's got. He says stay out of them, that's where the big ships are. I respect that opinion. I'd rather be in a fairway, 2 mile wide fairway on the edge with a good lookout and see the ship coming, but knowing that I'm probably not going to bump into a pitch black object in the middle of the night, which a lot of these platforms are not lit. So I think both he and I would agree, get way down below them altogether if you can and miss everything. You are so much safer in deep water than you are near the shore. If you're to have a storm come up on you, you're so much safer in deep water than you are near the shore. But a lot of people can't quite convince themselves of that. Another handy tool for planning your crossing is pilot charts. Here's a entire booklet that I've got of pilot charts. They cover the whole North Atlantic, this particular booklet, including the Gulf of Mexico. If I go to the back of the book, here's October. Now with these pilot charts, like I said, this is a whole book. You don't need to buy the whole book. So let's go to the next best option. What we have here is the same pilot chart, but instead of being in a book that I bought, it's online. Now I'm going to zoom in mainly into the Gulf of Mexico and show you some of the features. These little blue clusters throughout the chart are wind speed and direction, which is typical for this time of year, which is October. The longer the feather, the more likely that is the wind direction that you're going to get that time of year. Interesting thing here is you're liable to get a lot of northeast this time of year according to this chart. Now you can't go off of this. This is compiled data over something like 90 years. What it can do for you is, if you're planning long term, what month do I want to go? What month do I want to make my trip? Look at the different months and find out what the prevailing winds are and currents, and find the month that best suits you. But what you can do in planning for an immediate trip, or a trip that you got coming up soon, is take in these black lines here, which are shipping lanes. And what I do is I take a chart 411 of the Gulf of Mexico, and I've got my shipping lanes already put on that chart. And that helps you as you're making your crossing to know when things are going to get allowed to get more crowded and more busier. You can plan when you might have to sleep, if you're single-handedly especially. You got to sleep sometimes, you know you're not supposed to. You can say, okay, right about here, which is however many, whatever longitude that is. I get the longitude where I might be crossing it. Will be from Galveston up down through the Yucatan, and then just plan my, try to hit that while I'm wide awake, and same with these other ones. So the shipping lanes are very important. You can take them off of here and you can put them directly on a paper chart like I've done, and I'll show you in a minute. Okay, this is chart 411 that we have on the wall here at our yacht club. And you'll notice as we zoom in that in red here we have the shipping lanes. Also on this chart we went a step further. The blue lines are the current zones that NOAA weather that's the Coast Guard transmits on HF radio. We did that here in the club, so club members, we got an HF radio station so we can help track other club members as they're crossing the Gulf of Mexico. This green line right here, I don't know if you see it or not, goes up and zigzags up to here. That's a safety fairway. There's some yellow we kind of put in so we know which frequency we're more likely to pick up our club member as he's sailing across the Gulf. So this is really handy for me, and I do use it. I use a paper chart all the time, and you need to have paper charts of everywhere you're crossing the Gulf. Then you need paper charts of the individual areas so you can get in safely. Another thing you can get is a booklet called Coast Pilot, which will give you information of different ports throughout the area and give you an idea if it's known to be shoal at a certain spot, or just a bunch of valuable information. There's a light list. You get the light list, will tell you every aid to navigation in the United States. A flashing light at a certain port is, flashes so many times red, so many times white. So you can make sure you see a flashing light, you can check your light list and know that, okay, I'm headed into Tampa Bay, or whoops, I'm at Charlotte Harbor. So those are valuable sources. You need to have a paper chart for everywhere you're going to go on your boat. Chart plotter doesn't cut it. There's been one time in particular, where we lost our chart plotter, so we had no paper charts, no chart plotter, but one of the crew members so happened to have a little handheld plotter, and that's what got us across the Gulf. And it ate batteries like crazy. Paper charts are a must. Another site on the internet that's handy to use for planning a Gulf crossing, and especially handy for supporting somebody who's making a crossing, is a National Data Buoy Collection Center, NDBC. This is a partial view of the Gulf of Mexico, but this site covers all over the world. One good way this site is good for planning a trip is if it's a early hurricane season or late hurricane season crossing, and you want to get an idea of water temperature. And some of the buoys, not all of them, will have that information. Like on this particular one today, the water temperature at this buoy is 81.7 degrees. But it gives you the wind speed, significant wave height, duration of the waves, wave direction. This got wave direction on this one. Wind speed and direction, air temperature. This is all current data, and it's also got a history. Most of them do. I scroll down here, you got some historical data you can click on and find out what this station has recorded in the past. So NDBC is really handy, and especially handy for supporting someone's crossing. They could contact you and ask you about the conditions of wind and waves near them, or where they're going to be in the future, and you can give them that information. So, very handy site. If I zoom out, you'll get an idea how it covers the entire world. Several weeks before I leave, I'll start following different weather sites and watch for weather patterns. Try to get an idea of which way things are going, especially if it's tropical season. This particular site is Passage Weather, which one of my favorites, easy to use. So you'll watch the weather, get an idea of what's expected. Let's see what develops down here. Look at this. We get this low pressure. Look at that. Oh wow, we got 30, 35, 40 mile an hour winds spinning around, and something bad is supposed to form at the end of the week. Don't be surprised that, and this is another good reason to look at this weather. Prior to leaving in 2014 to take a boat from Corpus to Tampa, I watched the weather. And 7 days out, there's always this nasty crap. Actually, down in Belize or the Bay of Campeche, they forecasted nasty weather in this area. Every day, they pushed it to the 7-day mark. So that 7 days later, that weather was still 7 days off. That's pretty nasty right there. I wouldn't want to be out there in that. So that gets you worried. Do I go or do I not? Is this something that's never develops? So at least by watching the pattern, you can decide. And if it's 7 days off, perhaps you'll change your course. Instead of going to Fort Myers, you might go towards the Butte, Louisiana, where Port Eads Marina has been reopened after Hurricane Ike. It's a marina that's out in the middle of nowhere, and the only way you can get to it's by boat. But at least it's somewhere to go. Also, you got Venice, Louisiana, up in here that you could go to. But we could also duck into Apalachicola, Port St. Joe. Anyways, you start watching your weather ahead of time.